Okay, so probably most of you know me, but for those of you that don't, I am Tanya, and I have 3 children. You can all stand, turn around, take a bow. So, 2 of them I gave birth to, and 1 of them is mine anyway. I love her to bits, like she's my own daughter, so I don't call her my daughter-in-law, she's my daughter. But over the last while, quite a few people have asked me, what is the secret to raising such hardworking, amazing, God-fearing, servant-hearted adults? What is the key? What is my secret? And I can tell you that there's not just one, there are many. And I won't get into all of that today because this is not a preach on parenting. But the one thing that I can tell you for sure, that Roger and I had an expectation of our children of first-time obedience. And I want to just say that we had that expectation in a space of love and acceptance and connection, and not for the fear of punishment. Am I right, guys? Okay, so honestly, they did tell us while they were growing up repeatedly that we were the strictest parents on the planet. They did. Our boundaries and our expectations of them to obey them were because we wanted to create a safe space within which they could thrive. So what seemed to Stephen and Paige at the time, and they have changed their views now, it seemed like control, but actually it was our attempt to give them a safe place in which they could thrive. And I want to just illustrate this by the picture of a playground. So imagine a playground in a busy city center. If there is no fence around that playground, then the children are not actually free to play in that whole space without fear of getting killed, actually. But if an adult places a boundary fence around that playground, the children are free to play up to that line, and so they can enjoy the whole space, except if they climb over the wall and go straight into oncoming traffic. So the adults in people's life place the boundaries there so that the children have a safe place to thrive and can enjoy that space. So Roger and I did not negotiate on our values and the boundaries that we had set for our children. As parents, we set them up front as values for our family, and that was our role. And we took it very, very seriously. And Stephen and Paige's role was to play within the boundary lines that we had created for them. And as a proud mom of 2 amazing grown-up children who love and serve the Lord and who are not entangled in self-gratification, I want to say that long-term first-time obedience pays off. It really, really does. But like I said, my preach is not about parenting. That was just an illustration to kick off my preach. And today I am going to be talking about obedience. Fasten your seatbelts. Close the doors. Revival is going to happen. And it is going to start with us. It is going to start with a humbling submission of ourselves. It is going to start with self-leadership, self-control, discipline, and obedience. I bow my heart and I bend my knee. Lord, send revival and start with me. The word obedience is a noun, and this is its definition. It says, compliance with an order, request, or law, or submission to another's authority, submissive to the restraint or command of authority. Now, unfortunately, modern culture resists obedience because it may look like it represents control and domination. But wrong and right cannot be based on mob mentality or the shifting of cultural norms or the overcompensation for unhealthy control. Unfortunately, dysfunctional, illegitimate control and authority has marred our view of obedience. resulting in a worldwide move away from it. Even the deconstruction of church and faith is often as a reaction to abusive power and control, and I get that, I really do. Abuse of power is rampant, but we can't throw away something intended for our good and to be a blessing because of other people's bad representation of what authority actually looks like. Throughout history, and you can do a study on this if you like, but I've done a few periods of history study where man has walked away from obedience to God. It has always been followed by moral decay. You see, obedience to legitimate authority is good for us. It is good for mankind. It is good for society. It is a safe place. And it is liberating for us. It's like the playground picture. When we have that boundary line set for us, we can actually play in that whole space. So we're going to look at a story from the Old Testament which illustrates what God feels about obedience. So I'm going to set the scene. It's 1 Samuel 15, and the year is 1000 BC-ish, around there. Saul is the king, and Samuel is the prophet. And at that time, the Amalekites were terrorizing and tormenting the Israelites, but God had a plan. And it involved King Saul's full obedience. So he told King Saul to go to war against the Amalekites, and he told them to wipe every single one of them out with no exceptions, and he was very specific about this. So I'm going to read from verse 9. Then Saul went after Amalek, from the canyon all the way to Shur near the Egyptian border. He captured Agag, king of Amalek, alive. Everyone else was killed under the terms of the holy ban. Saul and the army made an exception for Agag, and for the choice sheep and cattle. They didn't include them under the terms of the holy ban, but all the rest, which nobody wanted anyway, they destroyed, as decreed by the holy ban. Then God spoke to Samuel. I'm sorry I ever made Saul king. He has turned his back on me. He refuses to do what I tell him to do. Samuel was angry when he heard this. He prayed his anger and disappointment all through the night. He got up early in the morning to confront Saul, but was told, Saul is gone. He went to Carmel to set up a victory monument in his own honor, and then was headed for Gilgal. You see, Saul's disobedience was rooted in pride. He was so busy validating himself that he didn't realize what he had actually done. And pride is a dangerous beast. By the time Samuel caught up with him, Saul had finished an act of worship, having used Amalekite plunder for burnt offerings sacrificed to God. So there he is busy sacrificing to God with the very animals that he kept disobeying God. And from verse 13, as Samuel came close, Saul cried out, God's blessings on you. I accomplished God's plan to the letter. This is actually Saul saying, I accomplished God's plan to the letter. What, Saul? Really? Really? The deception runs deep. So verse 14, Samuel said, so what's that I'm hearing, the bleating of sheep and the mewing of cattle? Only some Amalekite loot, said Saul. The soldiers saved back a few of the choice cattle and sheep to offer up a sacrifice to God, but everything else was destroyed under the holy ban. So here he is, busy making excuses, claiming partial obedience, which I can tell you is no obedience, and he's also blaming others. Anything to shift the responsibility away from the heat that he's under. And Samuel's not impressed, so from verse 16, Samuel says, enough, interrupted Samuel. Let me tell you what God told me last night. Saul said, go ahead, tell me. And Samuel told him, when you started out in this, you were nothing, and you knew it. Then God put you at the head of Israel, making you king over Israel. Then God sent you off to do a job for him, ordering you, go and put those sinners, the Amalekites, under holy ban. Go to war against them until you've totally wiped them out. So why did they not obey God? Why did you grab all this loot? Why, with God's eyes on you all the time, did you brazenly carry out this evil? And again, from verse 20, Saul defended himself. What are you talking about? I did obey God. I did the job God set before me. I brought in King Agag and destroyed the Amalekites under the terms of the holy ban. So the soldiers saved back a few choice sheep and cattle from the holy ban for sacrifice to God at Gilgal. What's wrong with that? We do not get to negotiate with God. Partial obedience is no obedience. From verse 22, then Samuel said, do you think that all God wants are sacrifices, empty rituals just for show? He wants you to listen to him. Plain listening is the thing, not staging a lavish religious production. Not doing what God tells you is far worse than fooling around in the occult. Getting self-important around God is far worse than witchcraft. Wow. Because you said no to God's command, he says no to your kingship. And Samuel never sees Saul again. And it is all downhill for Saul from there. You see, God takes obedience very seriously. And I know a lot of people will say, well, this story is from the Old Testament. It's the Old Covenant. But God doesn't change. And this story is the same God that we worship this morning. And God values obedience. You see, people use the new covenant and the message of grace to excuse themselves doing their own thing. And grace was never meant to be a license to do as we see fit. Taking matters into our own hands is very dangerous, regardless of which covenant we're talking about. You see, truth is not a sliding scale based on what you're feeling or what society demands. Truth is a person, and the person's name is Jesus, and he does not shift with the culture of the day. It actually really devastates me to see people using scripture and claiming love and grace of Jesus to give them license to do what feels good to them. Feelings are dangerous. They deceive us, and they can lead us down a very, very slippery slope to destruction. And it starts with a single seed. Did God really say? It's been the plot of the enemy since the Garden of Eden. Did God really say? And then it starts to unravel. You see, I've often heard this argument that actually Old Testament stories, Covenant, New stories. But then let's have a look at what Jesus says. This comes from his own mouth, and it's from John 14, verse 21. Whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love him and show myself to him. You see, even in the new covenant, even from Jesus, there is a reward for obedience. Obedience is good for us. And Jesus demonstrated it by obeying his Father even when it was really hard, even when he did not feel like it, even when he did not feel up to it. I'm going to read another very controversial scripture, but I want to clarify that these are the words of Jesus. Matthew 7, verse 21 to 23. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name and driven out demons in your name and done many mighty works in your name? And then I will say to them openly and publicly, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who act wickedly, disregarding my commands. There is a clear call and reward for obedience throughout Scripture. And I'm going to structure the rest of my preach by answering 3 questions. Number 1, why does God require obedience? Number 2, who and what should we be obedient to? And number 3, how do we be obedient? So why does God require obedience? I'm going to let you just think about that for a moment. Do you know we can sacrifice to God without loving him, but we obey him because we love him? In the Old Testament, disobedience resulted in them having to sacrifice. The Israelites had to sacrifice, but obedience prevents the need for sacrifice. And Jesus said, if you love me, you will obey my commands. So obeying Jesus, obeying God, is how we love him. Because God has always desired for us to trust him, which is why he put the 2 trees in the Garden of Eden. He wants us to choose him. And we were made in his image, so we have all of his attributes, including the attribute of freedom, which means we are free to choose him or not to choose him. God loves us so much that he gave us that freedom to choose him. And to choose him, we have to love him and trust him. You see, Saul was trying to puff himself up. He kept Agag as a trophy to himself, actually, as a sign of his own strength. He was trying to validate himself, and in doing that, he turned his back on trusting God. You see, obedience is evidence that we love, choose, and trust God. And if you look back to that scripture from Samuel, Samuel says there, that one verse where it says that Saul's disobedience is worse than witchcraft, which is quite hectic. But actually, witchcraft is seeking to guide your life by any other means than by trusting God. So by not trusting him and his word, God's calling it idolatry. Question number 2, who or what should we be obedient to? Now, honestly, there are so many voices out there claiming to know the truth. Have you heard them? Telling us what to do. And in fact, COVID has escalated this, because since COVID, we are inundated with online preachers from all over the world. Each one with their own views and opinions on what we should be doing. You know, honestly, I can tell you, Roger mentioned this morning. Roger, in a week, gets sent numerous videos and preachers from all over the world. This is what you should be preaching. This is what you should do. It's actually very confusing, and most of the time he chooses not to watch them. Because as a church, you need to understand that you need to trust this man, because he is spending time with God in the Word. If he's got an extra few hours to spare, he's going to spend it in the Word, asking God for himself personally. Yes, Roger listens to online preachers all the time, but he cannot listen to the myriad of voices that are out there. So I'm going to just say that there's nothing wrong with listening to online preachers. I do. But I want to encourage you, and actually I'm preaching to the converted here, but choosing a Bible-based church where you love and trust the leaders is crucial. Because it is actually easier to sit on your couch listening to an online preach where someone else has done all the work and is delivering the word to you on a golden platter of a preach. You don't actually have to do any work there. There is no substitute for your own time in the Word. This is what we should be obedient to. The Word of God. This book is our guide to what he requires of us. So the first step towards obedience is knowing what is required of us via this book and you and your personal time with him. But like I said, that is step number 1, because reading and studying the Bible is not good enough. Because studying the Bible is God investing in you. It is God pouring into you. Obedience is you pouring out. We are not supposed to read the Bible to gather an argument with other Christians. We are not supposed to read the Bible to tell people how smart we are and how much we know and how wrong they are. We do not read the Bible to impress and outwit each other. We read the Bible to hear what God is saying to us and obey it. The purpose of reading the Bible and Bible study is obedience. Because knowing the right thing to do is not good enough. We need to know what the right thing to do is and then actually do it. And I want to just share a story about me. I have spent most of my Christian life, I love this word, I have read it cover to cover many times, I love it, but I was missing something really, really important. I can honestly tell you that for most of my Christian life, I was reading it for someone else. See, I was reading it thinking, wow, this is a great scripture for this friend of mine who's going through a crisis. And so I would write it out and send it, or WhatsApp it, or take a photograph. I would also be reading it to gain ammunition against somebody that had crossed my path or disagreed with me. And I can honestly say that I was not actually reading the Bible for me. I was reading it to prepare for my next preach, or to hone my parenting skills so that I could tell Stephen and Paige what to do. And in 2021, God hit me boom, that actually I needed to go and read this book again, but this time through the lens of me and him. And it has changed my life. It has humbled me, and it has changed my life. I told everybody I wasn't crying today, and here I am. Yeah. But honestly, it works. It works. I have seen things that I have never seen before. I have come face to face with him like I have never come before, because I'm not sitting there trying to justify what somebody else isn't doing or what I'm doing. I'm not sitting there trying to direct somebody else's life. I'm actually directing my own life and aligning with him. And further to the word, the written word, which applies to all of us, there are going to be some specific calls to obedience for you. There's going to be specific missions which God is going to ask you to do. For us, it was giving up our business and our life and coming full-time into the church. For you, it will be something different. For you, it might be joining this church or moving to somewhere else or whatever it is that God has specifically asked you to do, but you're only going to know what that is when you're deeply rooted in the word for you and you're hearing him clearly. Noah was obedient in a specific area which saved his family and the future of humankind. And what I love about Noah's story is that it actually says here, it says Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of the time, and he walked faithfully with God. You see, it is easier to be obedient to God when we are walking closely with him, because God doesn't shout down his instructions and commands to us. He actually tells us them while we're walking in obedience with him in relationship. He tells us what he wants us to do in a place of connection and safety. What I also love about Noah is that he was obedient despite being mocked and ridiculed by society at the time. And often our obedience is going to attract some negative attention from onlookers, because our obedience won't make sense to them. Like Roger leaving his business when it was just coming right after all the years and slog that we'd put into it. As it was coming right, God said, walk away. That's not going to make sense to people. Why would you make a decision that doesn't make financial sense? But actually, when you've heard from God, you can carry that with confidence despite what other people are going to say. You know, people might say, why would you give money to the church? I remember the Fosters telling us when they first became Christians, some of their friends were saying, they make you give money to the church? Like, why would you do that? It might be, why would you come to church on a beautiful sunny Sunday when you could be at the beach? There are going to be a lot of voices that are going to question the decisions that we make when we're obeying God. But actually, if we're doing it out of conviction to Him, then we can do it regardless of what people are saying around us. And I really pray that God would remind you of the specific call on your life, because I do believe that for all of us, there is a specific call on our life. He's asked you to do something specifically. But let's just start with a few of the commands in the New Testament that are for all of us. Roger actually preached at the beginning of the year, let's just look at Jesus and do what He did. There are 1,050 commands in the New Testament, and they cover every aspect of man's relationships with God and with others. Obedience brings reward. It is good for us here and for eternity. I love grace. I love grace, and I'm all for it. But we can't ignore the words that are coming from Jesus. And Jesus said, "Whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father." There is a reward for obedience. And then he goes on to say, "And I too will love him and show myself to him." As I said before, it is a dangerous and slippery slope to argue and negotiate with Jesus, because His grace was not licensed to do our own thing. And most people get into hyper grace to try and justify their decision to move away from Jesus and His commands. And this has caused so much division in the church. How crafty is the enemy to use words from Scripture for us to attack and bring each other down, discredit one another because we think we are right. Let's look at the greatest and first of all the commands. It says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." Imagine a world where our desire to be right was trumped by our desire to honor the commandment to love one another. Imagine a world where loving one another was more important than our desire and need to be right. Do we really need to be right so much that we're going to dishonor and discredit the body of Christ, the bride of Jesus? Point number 3. How? If obedience is so important and so good for us, how come it's so hard, and how do we get it wrong so often? Because you cannot have obedience without self-discipline and self-leadership, which is why Roger started off the year preaching on self-leadership. Anything that is good for us in our lives requires discipline, but it's good for us, like exercise, eating healthy, going on date nights in your marriage, spending intentional quality time with your children. Those things don't just fall from the sky. Roger and I have been married for 30 years this year, and people will also say to us, "Oh, you guys are so lucky. You've got such a good marriage. You're just so lucky." Well, actually, it was not luck. It required discipline. We are intentional about that. These things don't happen by accident. Obedience comes with self-discipline. While I was preparing for this preach, I came across a study from the Center for Bible Engagement. And they did a study of 40,000 people aged between 8 and 80. And the study was to see how people were engaging with the Scripture. But something quite remarkable came out of the data, which was unexpected, but became the main focus of the study. So this is how the data went. So basically, when people were reading the Bible once a week, there was negligible effect on some key areas in our life. And I'm going to talk about those just now. But once a week, and that could be your Sunday at church. People that read the Bible twice a week, also negligible effect on some key areas in our life. 3 times a week, a tiny little blip on the graph, but negligible effect actually. 4 times a week, boom, the graph goes off the chart. Signs of life. And one would expect there to be a gradual increase from day 1, day 2, day 3, but actually it was nothing to 4. That's what it took. So what were the key areas of people's lives that were impacted? After reading the Bible 4 times a week, loneliness drops by 30%. If you are lonely, read the Bible 4 times a week. Anger drops by 32%. Bitterness in relationships drops by 40%. Alcoholism drops by 57%. Now, the next one for me was such a revelation. Feeling spiritually stagnant drops by 60%. Boom. Michaela's loving it. So, I would say over my years of pastoring in the church, and it's been 24 years or something like that, I would say this is the most common of Christian ailments. Feeling spiritually dry, feeling stagnant, being in the desert place. We can't pray this out of you. There is a cure for this spiritual ailment, and it's called the Word of God 4 times a week. It goes on. Viewing pornography drops by 61%. Now, here's the interesting thing. Those are the things that dropped, but there are 2 things that increased. Sharing our faith increased by 200%. Because we have the confidence in His Word, because we have owned it. Discipling others increased by 230%. We need to disciple, we need to reach the lost. We are not going to do it if we are not self-disciplined and spending time in the Word. So obedience is not just the key for us to live fulfilled, fruitful lives playing in the whole playground, but it's actually the key to getting the lost saved out there. God requires obedience from you, for you, but also to go over the wall for the rest of the world. It's not just for your freedom, it's for the freedom that you can give to others. People are dying and going to hell. We don't have time to mess around. We cannot evangelize and reach the lost if we are undisciplined people who are living stagnant lives. We need to fall in love with this again. It will change your life because Jesus tells us there is a reward for obedience to God's word, but it will change the lives of our community and beyond. So if we want revival, it is going to start with us. It's going to start here and here. That's where it starts. So let's stop pointing fingers. Let's stop directing everybody else, and let's just align ourselves with the truth of His word. Now at Hillside, we always have ministry afterwards, but we're not going to today because we cannot pray obedience into you. We can't make you do this. So I'm going to say, if you need prayer for healing, come up, please do. But we can't ask God to make us obedient because actually He's already done His part. Like when the adults built the playground fence, that was their part. The children's part is to play within that boundary. We have a role to play. It would be like me saying, God, I really, really want to lose weight. Please stop me from eating this cake. He's not going to do that. God, please make me want to exercise. It's not just not going to happen. We have a responsibility in our healthy eating, in our exercising, in our parenting, in our marriages, and we also have a responsibility to obey the word of God. It's not anyone else's responsibility. And in actual fact, I can just say, for us as leaders, it will make our life so much easier. If you don't come to us because you are spiritually stagnant, but you rather spend time in the Word, because we can want that for you. We can want for you to be spiritually alive. We can want it. We can pray for it. We can. But it's not going to happen through our prayers. It is going to happen by your obedience. So I'm going to encourage you today to go home, to find your Bible, dust it off, and saturate yourself with His Word, not just today, but at least 4 times a week. It will change your life so that we can go and reach a lost world. Amen.